In the weather today, the weather pattern flips and we finally head into the second half of winter with Arctic air, blizzards, and winter storms. First of all, the hot spot around the world is going to be Marble Bar, Australia, up in the northwest. We've been flip-flopping back and forth between the interior and the northwest, and today, Marble Bar, 118 degrees. There's a look at Marble Bar. A lot of red dirt, and it is an old gold mining town from the turn of the century. Still has 900 people. I'm not really sure why anybody would live there, to be honest. The cold spot in the Great Cold Bowl of eastern Siberia around Oymyakon. Today it's going to be Yurty, Russia, with minus 68. There is no imagery in Yurty, but this is maybe 50 miles to the northeast on the Magadan-Yakutsk road, and this shows that taiga region. Very barren, and not really any towns around there. The surface analysis for this afternoon shows developing weather systems in the western U.S., one weak frontal system in Arizona, and a much stronger one moving through the Siskiyous and into the Great Basin. The Arctic front, well, that's on the way. Now starting to see the very first intrusion into the north-central U.S., and temperatures coming down to near zero in Montana. In the East Coast, we've got that great weather system from the Midwest departing finally, producing heavy snows in the Canadian Maritimes and a lot of wraparound into Quebec and Ontario. Lake effect snows are ongoing, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Lake Huron, and some of the liquid precip extending all the way up towards Montreal. Temperatures well up into the 30s with that warm conveyor belt wrapping well around that system. Here's a simplified view of things. This is the sea level pressure and thickness. The Arctic front coming south, and here's that Pacific weather system moving into northern California and Nevada. And more importantly, if you look at the ribbons of thickness, this paints out a baroclinic zone across the southern states. That's going to mark the location of the jet stream and also the southern storm track. So this weather system will be following that very closely. In the northeastern U.S., outgoing weather system heading into the Maritimes, deep low in Quebec, and on the backside, cold advection filtering into the northeastern U.S., and with that, some cumuliform clouds and showers off of the lakes. We've got lake effect snow warnings through tomorrow night, east of Lake Ontario, including Watertown and Oswego. Looking for 8 to 16 inches of snow there. And winter weather advisories through tomorrow evening, east of Lake Erie. Could be 4 to 8 inches of snow there. And for the rest of today, in the Allegheny Mountains, right about there, through Cumberland, about 2 to 4 inches of snow possible above 2,500 feet. And across much of this area, wind advisories from Rochester, Albany, New York, all the way down towards Knoxville. In the southeastern U.S., fair skies, but we do see that cirrus streaming overhead, and that's the southern branch of the polar front jet, hanging pretty close to this frontal system, which extends through the Bahamas and into the Keys. There are hazardous beach conditions around Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and also around Fort Myers up to Tampa, looking at high surf and rip currents. There's a look at that jet. This is 300 millibars, and that's going to be about 30,000 feet. So we do have that branch right there. Now, I did assume that was the polar front jet because I know that front has come pretty far south. However, it is stronger up at 200 millibars, 150 knots over Texas, and it has an anticyclonic curve. So that tells me that probably is a subtropical jet or has characteristics of both types of jets. This definitely here is a polar front jet that's diving down the west coast of the U.S. and moving through the Midwest. And you can see over the next few days that jet axis comes into the base of the trough, a medium-scale trough through the central U.S., driving that weather system heading into the Great Plains for late week. And then we get the Arctic air moving in for the weekend. And the flow does kind of die off a little bit because there's a surface anticyclone, and when you have an anticyclone, you're spreading out the temperature gradient, and that reduces the effects in the upper levels. So there does tend to be a little bit of weakening of the flow aloft. And as we go into midweek, sustained northerly flow, and that may bring another Arctic air mass in for later in the week. Details on that, not all that clear, but I'll show that to you momentarily. In the southern plains, air mass recovery begins. We pick up southwesterly flow, downslope conditions, and 60s all the way into the DFW area and into eastern Louisiana. The dew points are still on the low side, 20s. However, down to the south, 50s dew points lurking down around Corpus Christi and Brownsville, and those will start surging northward over the next 24 hours. But for today, clear skies, that 150 knot subtropical jet or hybrid jet across Texas, and then up to the north. Yes, you can see that snow track. There it is. Snow came all the way down to Dumas, Perryton, Wichita, and Chanute, Kansas. And then a look up there in the northern plains. That snow continues all the way northward, and we've got the Arctic front coming down as well. Not very much cloud associated with that. It is ushering in much colder and drier air, but some parts of Canada getting snow at this hour. And there's a closer look at that front, and momentarily we'll go up into Canada and see what the air mass is doing. For the western U.S., a series of fronts working through California. Let's look at the satellite imagery. Most of this that you see out here in the Pacific, that's going to be cumulus and stratocumulus. The open cell elements right in here, that's going to be associated with low-level cyclonic flow. And further south, this is associated with anticyclonic flow. Just kind of a general rule of thumb. So we do know that the strong surface systems are located up there to the north. We do have numerous advisories for California and Nevada, just a bunch of them. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and show you this. There's that blizzard warning, the winter storm warning for Austin, Eureka, winter storm warning in the northern Sierras from Yosemite northward, and then to the south, that's going to be a winter weather advisory. Out here, looking for about 12 to 24 inches of snow, and further south, more on the order of 4 to 8 inches with higher amounts in the mountains. Most of these are going to be wind advisories. I'm not going to go through all those, and these are going to be cold weather advisories. And a variety of winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories throughout much of the northwestern U.S. And as we go east of the Rockies, we get into cold weather advisories and wind chill warnings. And those extend through next week. So we'll go into more detail on this momentarily, but let's head up north into Alaska. And we do see cold air building to the east. That's it right there. Minus 30s, minus 40s, and even minus 49 at Fort Good Hope. Environment Canada has issued an Arctic outflow warning through the remainder of the week for coastal British Columbia. That runs from about Queen Charlotte Strait up through Bella Bella, Prince Rupert, and up to Mazielan Junction. So right in there, and that includes the mountains as well. So that's going to be for the remainder of the week. Could see wind chills minus 20 to minus 30 Celsius in that region. Extreme cold warnings throughout much of northern Saskatchewan, northern Alberta, and up into the Northwest Territories, parts of Yukon as well, and extreme cold warnings throughout much of the interior of British Columbia, so right through that region. It's going to be a cold one over the next week, and out to the east. That's where we pick up winter storm warnings in much of Quebec, and as you get into Nova Scotia, that's where we get the rainfall warnings. As mentioned, we do have significant amounts of Arctic air lurking up to the north. The oranges are significant. That's going to be minus 30 and down. Typically this time of year we should see about minus 15 to minus 20 in this region. So this is kind of a large swath of orange. Then as we go into the weekend, watch how that expands southwestward. Saturday morning, pretty much everywhere from Montana up to Victoria Island and back into eastern Alaska. So that's a very extensive zone in the Arctic source region and being driven by this 1056 millibar high, which is also quite high in terms of pressure. Here's how it looked a few days before the great 1983 outbreak. Similar distribution of Arctic air, mostly up in the Northwest Territories and Saskatchewan, but eventually it did filter south. There it is in the Dakotas. And the record-setting 1985 outbreak, a little bit more concentrated and colder up in the Northwest Territories, and that plunged southward pretty quickly. So definitely a lot of parallels with those earlier systems. However, coming back to today, a big limiting factor will be the lack of snow cover in the southern U.S. So this will mostly affect the Midwest and the northern plains. That's going to form kind of an insulating blanket. Let me bring you the snow cover over the weekend. A couple of good snow tracks through Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and another little zone of snow developing early next week. But not really anything south of Interstate 40, so the air mass is going to modify pretty rapidly across Texas and Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, so on. But up north, it is going to be brutal. Let me show you the temperatures. This is from the latest 12Z model run, and there's the cold air coming down over Friday and Saturday. And you can see these minus 10s to minus 20s settling in across the Dakotas and Minnesota. And a lot of it is heading to the eastern U.S. And as we go into Monday morning, a lot of that Arctic air sinking southward, pressures about 1040 to 1045 millibars through the plains. And then Tuesday should be the coldest morning in many areas of the south. Looks like the zero line may be about northern Arkansas through Tennessee, and the 15 to 20 degree line along the Interstate 20 corridor. However, a lot of the fine details are still yet to be worked out. This is 144 hours away, so we're going to check back in on this on Friday and see what's new. So this is where we're at this evening. This is the composite chart, and this has all the features that I thought you might like. It's got the wind, the clouds in varying shades of gray. It's got the precip, the thickness, and the pressure. So let's set it into motion. Going into tonight and then tomorrow morning, that weather system working into the Rockies. So that's going to be the main focus going into the evening hours. It's already starting to emerge into the panhandles. So a repeat of that winter storm there in the panhandles in western Kansas, eastern Colorado. That's going to be a bad time to be traveling that part of the country. And the cold front, yeah, that's going to be it right there, all the way down to Chihuahua. And the warm front, that appears to go all the way north along the Interstate 44 corridor. A lot of snow up to the north. It is going to be dry. We don't have much time for air mass recovery, but with strong dynamics, dry conditions, we're going to get some pretty good precipitation efficiencies up there. So where the precip does fall, it is going to pile up, looking at maybe 3 to 5 inches in some places north of Interstate 70. Cold air coming down the backside, the Arctic air kind of blending in, which is going to be about right in here. And then we get round one of the cold air. So this is it for Friday. Big weather system moving into the central U.S. and the Mississippi River Valley, warm front up to Illinois, and a calm ahead with some snow up through Chicago and up towards the Quad Cities. The main bulk of the Arctic air, that's going to be up to the north. So this weather system, pressure goes down to 980 millibars, deepens quite a bit, although the earlier GFS runs from last week, they were probably a little bit aggressive with the deepening. So we'll have to see if that actually works out the way it shows. But significant Great Lakes system, the Arctic air starts its plunge south on Saturday and Sunday. And with that, a lot of clouds. Don't see much in the way of precip, since the precipitable waters are going to be limited. Meanwhile, a Pacific system coming onto the coast. So this could interact with the cold air mass. We'll see how that all comes together. Going into late Saturday and Sunday. Looks like that's that interaction right there. And a very fast-moving system already passed over the eastern side of that cold dome for Sunday. Big plunge of cold air for Sunday, and that's going to bring high winds, about 25, gusting to 35, maybe even 45 miles an hour. So there will be quite a wind chill, and those 486 decameter thicknesses coming down through the Dakotas. Starting to get some precip associated with that tropical air forming in Mississippi. The cold front plunges through Texas overnight, Sunday night, and a big 1054 millibar high settling in across Wyoming for early Monday. The remainder of the cold air comes south. The surface system works up into the northeastern U.S., some snow showers back in behind that. Lake effect snows get going on the Great Lakes, and Monday and Tuesday will just be cold across much of the country. And it does look like later on for next week, possibly a second surge of cold air. And that's it. We don't have a good read on how strong this is going to be, but already looks like pressures are about 1045 millibars. I did not see a huge volume of cold air up north. At least after the main push, I was not seeing a whole lot of it. So this is going to be Monday. The cold air spreads south. And then as we get into midweek, looking at subdued temperatures up north. Looks like maybe typical readings for this time of year. So this will be typical temperatures, but with very strong northerly flow. So I'm not really too sure how much of this will make it south later in the week. We'll just have to see how that works out. But with that intense northerly flow, probably much below normal, at least for the northern half of the country. Some of you may be wondering about that sudden stratospheric warming. This is the heights, temperature, and vorticity chart. The shading is vorticity. This is up at 10 millibars, about 100,000 feet. And what we see is the polar vortex across the Barents Sea and the far northern Atlantic. We do have an anticyclone. That's what we should see if we're in a full sudden stratospheric warming event. But we've got more of a displaced vortex pattern, so it's kind of in between, and it is a minor sudden stratospheric warming event. Just some cross-polar flow right there. The regular chart looks like this. There you go, very similar. And it looks like as we go into next week, kind of a double-lobed structure to that polar vortex. Anyway, I think this is still propagating downward towards the troposphere, so there could be additional changes in store over the next month or so. So we shall see. And here's a Q-vector chart for our more technical viewers. This tracks the flow of upwards and downward motion. The red is going to be the upward motion, and you can see a lot of it concentrated on that area where we have the winter storm warnings and weather advisories. So we can just follow along over the next day or so. By tomorrow morning, most of the lift focused on northern Arizona, and they do have winter weather advisories there as well for all of Thursday. Mostly above 3,500 feet. They're looking for about 1 to 3 inches of snow. Elevations above 6,000 getting 3 to 6 inches. And that upward motion moves into Texas for Thursday. And I forgot to mention it, but we are expecting some severe weather in the Gulf Coast area. SPC has an enhanced risk for basically East Texas all the way out towards Georgia for late tomorrow into Friday. That wave will lift up into the northeastern U.S., and not very much follows after that, kind of an anticyclonic pattern. One final strong wave, we've covered that already, traversing the central U.S. for Sunday, and that's going to be somewhat of a dry system. But after that, conditions should become a little bit more stagnant as we go into the middle of next week. All right, that will do it for this edition of Forecast Lab. I do want to thank our newest Patreon supporters, Michael, The Barco, and Jeff Bavard Levesque. Thank you very much for your support. At the end of the program, after the titles, we'll have those cross-sections back once again. And we'll return on Friday for another edition of this program and have a up-to-date version of the models for next week, and we'll check on that Arctic cold. Okay, until then, hope you have a great Wednesday evening, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.